And welcome back to In This Corner. We just heard from Herb Dean, and now we have another one of the most recognizable names in all of the sport. We're going to read out his credentials, but you know who it is here. Of course, we're talking about a man that has been in the sport refereeing for 26 years. Also a veteran of the LAPD for 22 years. Currently commentator for Bellator alongside Mike Goldberg, Josh Thompson, Morrow. Also hosting the Weighing In podcast with Josh Thompson. You know who it is, the one and only Big John McCarthy. Big John, how are you?
I'm good, Cyrus. How you doing, man? Good to see you.
Not too bad, man. Just surviving here in Tennessee. Right here with you, my friend. You're just a couple hours away. Let's talk about that. You made the move from Las Vegas, and now you're in Tennessee. How have you liked that change, the drastic change from Vegas to the volunteer state?
You know, it is a change, but it's been a really good change. The people here are awesome, and the state is awesome. I enjoy, the way that they look at things and the way that they rally around, the Vols, University of Tennessee and stuff. I know there's guys that like, the Memphis Tigers and all that, but
sure.
It's just really, really enjoy the atmosphere.
So are you a Vols fan now?
I am now. my boys will go, but hell yes.
That's
root
awesome.
For the locals.
Very, very cool. You're in Knoxville. You got to be a Vols fan. You're surrounded by it. I'm surprised you're not wearing an orange shirt right now.
No, that's the one thing that I have not done. I have not gotten to the point where I can wear the Tennessee orange. I'll do it with the black a little bit, with the little black hat with the orange. I got that, but not the reverse.
I got you. It's a little much. Bright. It's a little much. I agree. Well, let's talk about the situation at hand. Obviously, this coronavirus pandemic. Wow, it has hit us all for a loop here, all around the country. Obviously, different situations in different states and different areas. Thankfully, Tennessee has not been hit very bad. That being said, how have you adjusted to the quarantine, and how much has it really changed your life?
Well, it's changed my life in the fact that I haven't been able to really work. I haven't been doing shows with Bellator, so that's been different. We started a rehash show with it's called Recharge with Bellator that I've been doing out of the house and stuff. But, it's different. It's a different way of life. I don't like it. I used to complain about, having to travel all over the place. But when you get used to working, you like to work. It's something you look forward to. I miss the camaraderie of all the people that I get to work with that I like so much. So it's been a change.
Yeah, it certainly is different. I do not miss those. I love working, but I don't miss the 12, the 15, the 16-hour flights.
No.
That right there, I don't miss that a bit. You can't possibly miss that.
No, I do not miss those at all. Those are the things that are horrible. But just the it's the same thing. It's that team atmosphere. Whether if you're someone that played on a team in high school, college, and you got that camaraderie, if you're a professional, it's the same thing that you have when you're part of a promotion and you're working with those people. There's a camaraderie there, and you get used to seeing that person either every week or every 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And when they're not there, it's like, dang, I miss that guy.
Yeah. Well, no doubt. We worked together with ACB, now ACA, and we got to travel the world a little bit. Obviously a lot of shows in Russia. And I remember vividly being in Moscow, Russia, I do believe, waiting to see if we could make it home for Christmas. Literally, a blizzard happening in the middle of the airport, and somehow, some way they got that plane up. And I thought for sure we were missing out on Christmas, for sure.
Yeah, oh, no doubt about it. That was one. And as we were sitting in the thing, and I'm watching the snow, and it's just getting heavier and heavier and heavier. I'm going, this is not looking good.
No.
But you know what? Those are the things, they're kind of a stressor at that point, because you want to get home to have Christmas with family and stuff, but just part of life and part of being on the road with fights, and it's what makes it fun.
Yeah, you're right. The camaraderie was definitely a lot of fun. We had a lot of good conversations, and me, yourself, Herb Dean, obviously, who we just got done talking to, and really a lot of fun. But, since then, things have changed a little bit. And before we dig into the fight stuff, which is definitely a lot more fun to talk about, I got to talk about this protest situation, the riot situation going on, of course, due to the death of George Floyd, which kind of kickstarted all this. The riot thing, obviously, you're one of the first people I thought of, because in my life, I have really met very few people that had such significant, not a part of the riots, but you were there, obviously working for the LAPD. You had to deal with that situation. That obviously, seeing all this has to take you back to that. Just kind of give me an idea of what you had to deal with at that time, and what they're dealing with right now.
They're dealing with, things that are very similar. It almost goes on a 25 or 30-year cycle, because my dad was on LAPD. He was part of the Watts riots that happened in 1965. And almost 30 years later, in 92 is when I was part of the LA riots. And now you're looking at 2020. But they're different. What happened in the Watts riots and what happened in the LA riots is different than what happened here. And this was more, in my opinion, it's planned. There was a lot of planning that went into this. People were trying to orchestrate things based upon waiting for something to occur and then sending their troops out to try to cause, some chaos. And it's unfortunate because, first off, I believe everybody. I absolutely believe in the freedom of speech. And I believe everyone should be able to protest if they feel that what happened with George Floyd was wrong, which I believe it was wrong. I think it was handled horribly. I don't think that man should have been in a position where his life would have even been endangered. But there's ways of doing things the right way. Yeah. And there's ways of doing things where you're trying to have, you're trying to get attention in a way, and you're creating not only more problems for innocent people, with the whole thing that we talked about at the beginning of the COVID. Yeah. A lot of people have been out of work, and a lot of small business owners and a lot of people have really stretched themselves thin, but they're just coming back. And then they have people that aren't even part of the population in that area coming in and creating a problem, creating a situation. Almost, they're taking matches and they're throwing them on gasoline and trying to create this problem when there is a problem. And I think the protest part, absolutely, go ahead, protest all you want. Make people understand you're mad about this. Work towards change. Great. Yeah. That's the way to do it. But what is happening is not the way to do it. This is wrong. It's wrong for everybody in this country. And it's people that do not believe in the values that this country has had. They're trying to take an issue and trying to morph it into something different. Cyrus, you and I have both been around the world. Yes. Okay. I've been everywhere. And I'm not so stupid to think that racism will ever go away. I don't think it ever will. Yeah. Okay? I don't either. I think there are those people out there. Now, people can sit there and say what they want about me. I've had people call me a racist. I'm about the least racist human being there is. And if you knew how I grew up and who I grew up with as friends, it's like, sure, I don't care what color you are. I don't care anything about your gender. I don't care about your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter to me. I care if are you a good person or are you an asshole? I'm sorry. That's just the way I look at it. Sure. And, you could be a multitude of different things being that one person, but what we have going on right now, it's sad. It'll go away. Things will calm down, but we have a lot of innocent people that have been hurt. Their lives have been altered dramatically or indefinitely. And it's just the wrong way of going about it. Hopefully things end soon.
I agree. And, it does, you talk about the protest and that you definitely support the protest. And I definitely do too. And obviously there's a big difference, there's a line in the sand between the ones that are trying to peacefully protest and the ones that are just trying to cause trouble and see an opportunity. That being said, the race relations between the police, and I would mainly say this, the African-American population seems to be the one that really always comes up and never seems to have gone away. Yeah. That being said, you were on the front lines of this. You're in the LAPD. Obviously, you saw this on a daily basis. Have we made some strides, in your estimation, from 25 years ago when we saw, these riots with Rodney King, et cetera? Have we seen some strides there, or do you think we still have a long way to go as far as that relationship between the police and between this community?
Well, I'm going to tell you straight out, obviously we always have ways to go because thing, it comes down to this: nothing is perfect. Okay, and so you're always working towards creating perfection, but perfection's never going to happen. So because there can always be that one person, that one thing that just is wrong, but it inserts itself in a situation, and then you have more. But I will tell you this: when I worked in LA, I was helped by more people in South Central LA that lived there. They would help me with things, and I would try to help them in return, because those people are hardworking people. They are trying to get on with their lives. They're trying to have a job. When someone burns down the restaurant that they work in, or the hardware store that they're employed at, they realize, now I can't feed my family. And so there's things there that, it's so sad to see. But I will tell you, we're always going to have issues, because we're kind of tribal. People are tribal. And when you are used to what is commonplace in your tribe, you've got to be open in listening to the other tribe. And it's okay that, they're different or you're different.
Sure.
It is a matter of being that person that can sit there and say, having a difference is actually cool. Tell me why you like that. Tell me how you cook that way. That's all good.
Sure.
I always look and say, if you can just open up, and I turn things 180 degrees is my way of looking at things. Okay, this is the way I look at it. Let me turn it 180 degrees and see if what that person is looking at on the other side. I don't think we're ever going to have perfect in any country. But like I said, you've been all over. I've been all over. I've seen racism. I've been there when it's been big, and I've been there when it's been small. Yep. And I will tell you that this country that we live in is one of the least racist countries I've ever been in. And I've been to a lot. Okay. Yeah. And you can take a look and you go, and sometimes it's not racism towards, black or white, it's other things. But, I don't think there will ever be that. It's gone.
No, there's not going to be a utopia. I mean, by any means. Yeah, you're absolutely right there.
I don't believe you're born with it. I think you're taught it, and so there will always be someone trying to push their agenda.
Yeah, and I think it's a generational thing, and I think the further the more open we get as a society, I think it's going to start to be weaned out. To be honest with you, and I think we've made progress. I mean,
we have.
In the 38 years I've been alive, it seems like we have. Anyways, that being said, let's pivot to mixed martial arts.
Thank God.
Yeah, right. Let's get out of this stuff. That being said, events are obviously starting to pop up. Bellator, not quite yet. I imagine very, very soon. UFC has. They've come under a lot of criticism for doing so. And I think that there's good points on both sides of it. More good points on UFC's side, to be honest. Because I think, from what I've seen, that they've done a good job of handling these events. What are your thoughts? You're a guy that's been a big part of the athletic commissions and a big part of how this sport is ran. Do you feel like they've done a good job safety-wise and how they've been running these shows?
Yeah. Since they've opened up and they did their shows in Florida, they did the first 3 in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I think they did everything they could within their power to, limit exposure and try to follow guidelines that were, given to them as ideas. I think they've done a fantastic job. I had a problem, when they were trying to do the show that was in California at Tachi Palace. It was wrong, and as wrong as you're looking and saying, I understand why they were trying, but
sure,
there comes a point when you're breaking the rules that have made you. And when you have, high-level referees like Herb Dean and Jason Herzog and Mike Beltran living in that state, and none of them are going to be working that show, there's a reason why. It's probably not the right thing to do at that time based upon the way you're doing it. Once they went to Jacksonville, I think that they have done everything to their best of their ability to be safe. Again, there's no perfection. And so could it be that someone, comes down with it? They caught Jacare and his corner people. Yeah. Hey, give him credit. It's not that Jacare has really come down with the disease, but he's carrying it, And so what more can you ask of them? They're trying to move forward, and everyone has to move forward. I look at this as there's so many things out there. I think we were fed something that, was in a way put out there to scare people because they wanted to catch people's attention with this. And I think that, there are people that absolutely need to be careful when it comes to the coronavirus. Elderly people, if you're sick, you should have the common sense, you need to stay inside. Elderly people need to be careful of being around people. But, we've been open and available to viruses throughout time. And there will be other ones coming forth in the future. So we have to get on with life. We have to move forward. And I think the UFC did a really good job of saying, all right, it's time for us to do something. We have a business to run. We have fighters that need to get paid. And so I have nothing but, praise for what they've done in getting going.
Yeah, it's so ironic that the one sport where contact is very, very apparent with little sort of protection is the one sport that really got going first. It's pretty amazing, to be honest with you. And but that being said, one fight that happened on that, I believe it was 249 card with Cruz and Cejudo. There was a call on this, and I want to pivot into something else here. I thought that the call was good with Cruz and Cejudo. I thought that it was the right call. I thought Dominic was taking a lot of shots. I think by the book, he handled it like he should have handled it. We're talking about referee Keith Peterson. First, I do want to get your opinion on that stoppage. And I did kind of say in your podcast that you addressed it, but I want to get it here. That being said, not only do I want to know that, but I want to know, you've always been very by the book. Do you treat every fight the same when you get into these professional ranks? And should you treat a championship fight with two veterans the same that you should treat a fight with a couple guys on the undercard that maybe have 4 fights apiece? Do you treat them the same by the book? Go ahead.
No, you cannot.
Okay.
And any referee that tells you, oh, I do every fight the same, you go, okay. And that guy's not a very good referee. You just can't, because there's expectations. Now, what you do is you treat every fight the same as far as if a person cannot protect themselves or has been put out, they can be put out. You can see them go unconscious, and you're coming in to stop it, and a guy comes and clips them with another shot, and it wakes them up. It's okay.
Sure.
You saw him go unconscious. You stop the fight. It's good. But when you talk about championship fights, and you're talking about guys that are either multiple belt holders or 2 belt holders coming together, there's a lot of things going into this. With Cruz coming back, you try to give those guys as much leeway as you can in letting them go on in the fight. As I always call it, I let them swim into really deep water.
Sure. Okay.
Now, if they're bubbling and they're popping their head up and down, I'm looking at them, but I'm going to let them suck in some water, but once I see that they're drowning, I'm going to get them out of the fight. And what you saw with Keith in that fight is the stoppage was okay. Dominic got hurt with a knee.
Sure.
That knee crushed him. And then he is getting hit with shots, but he is trying to do what we would want the fighter to do, because we want the fighter to do one of 2 things here. I don't want him to really try to fight back, because that's not going to be successful for him. So when we have a guy that can, he starts swinging back, it's like, you're going to get the worst of this. But I want to see a guy that either defends himself, takes away the ability of his opponent to continue with that attack, or is trying to move themselves into a better position that will limit the attack. So that was what Dominic was trying to do. He's trying to do that second half. He's trying to move his body into a better position that will limit the attack that Cejudo is putting on him, because he's trying to put his hands to the floor, and he knows, I'm going to take shots putting my hands to the floor, but that's what's going to get me back.
Sure.
And that was his thought process. But he took a lot of shots, and as soon as that attack stops, it doesn't take long for the fighter to recover pretty fully at times, especially when they're in really good shape and they haven't gone that long, which he had not at that point. And he did. He's not realizing how much he took. So, would I have let the fight go a little bit far? I probably would have, because it's Dominic Cruz. because I know everything that guy has done in the past. I know how much he can take. I'm going to let him go as far as I can. But was it a bad stop? No, it was not a bad stop. Keith Peterson was well within his right to stop that fight, and he made a choice. And I don't like what Dominic did in the end, saying that, Keith was, under the influence
like cigarettes
of alcohol. Come on, you're above that. Stop.
Yeah. It's the thing with referees, and I always think about that with you guys, and just any sort of referee, umpire, etc. One of the hardest jobs in the world, because you hold so much in your hands that so many people hold so dear to them. Sports is life for so many people, just fans, and then not to mention the athletes. And there's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot on the line with these guys. It has to be one of the toughest things to be a referee. Obviously, you've done it for so long, so you have to develop thick skin, to say the least. But now with social media blowing up in this whole time frame, it's like another level. What do you got? You got 125 different MMA podcasts, and of course, you got millions of people talking about it on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, whatever. What has that been like for you? I mean, because obviously they've come down on you just like they've come down on everybody. And some guys, it seems like they pile on. Like your Mario Yamasaki, obviously guys that just piled on Mario Yamasaki over the years, and Mazzagatti and Yves Levine and Herb, everybody's gotten it. How do you handle that?
You have to really have to look and say, all right, who are the important people? Who are the people that I can rely on to give me good information about, hey, did I do that right? Could I have done it better? What should I have done that maybe is different? And you rely on those people. And so you have your 3 or 4 people that you'll talk to, that you'll call, and everyone can pile all of that stuff on in your Twitter, and you just look at it and go, yeah, I don't care what you think. Because you have to have that mindset. You have to have that thick skin. If you start to care about what people out there who have never walked in your shoes are saying about you and your job performance when they have no idea what it is like, you're probably not going to last very long. It is, and
it could affect how you're doing your job.
It will definitely affect. Well, you'll see guys that they'll do one fight and they'll get an early stoppage, and all of a sudden they're getting crushed. And the next time you see them, it's a fight where they let someone just get crushed because they're afraid of stopping it too soon because they don't want that. So they almost go to the opposite end. And you've got to learn to say, here's the people that I'll listen to. I'll take in their information. If there's something for me to fix, I'm going to work at fixing that. And at that point, I don't worry about what anyone else says.
Yeah. You're right. I think that's the way you have to handle it. Do you get awestruck at certain events still to this day? Some of these environments, some of these fight buildups and these main events, does any of it ever kind of get you a little bit and you kind of look around and you're like, oh my goodness, this is an event. This is a situation, a benchmark here in the sport. Do you ever get that feeling sometimes?
Not anymore. No.
Yeah.
I did at times, at certain points with certain, fights and, where it was at.
Was there a fight you can think back of that just kind of blew your mind and you're like, okay.
It was the last time that I can really tell you that I went, wow, was when I stood inside the UFC cage at 129, I think it was, which was in Toronto, Canada. It was the first big event in Toronto. It was 55,000 people. And, they had offered me the main event. And I said, I would rather have the Mark Hominick, Jose Aldo fight. And they go, why? Why would you want that over George St. Pierre? And I said, I just think it's a better fight than, what's going to, and that's the one, if I was given a choice, that's what I got. So I was standing in the cage and looking around. I go, did I ever think that the sport would blow up to this? And I was in awe of that situation.
Yeah. UFC 2 is when you first jumped in there, man. That's crazy. And I remember that too. And Hominick with the massive hematoma. Oh my goodness, man. That's a sight. Well, you moved on here. You're not refereeing actively anymore, correct? You've officially made that transition. I remember when you were even thinking about this. This is when we were working together and we were talking about this, and you make this change over to commentary. And that is a big change. Being a commentator, there's a lot more to it than just getting on a microphone and talking. You definitely have to find your spots. You have to get good chemistry with your play-by-play guy. Obviously, working with a guy like Mike Goldberg is that's easy. This guy's been doing it forever. What a professional. I've always loved what he does. And Morrow Ronaldo is another incredible guy that you guys have on your staff. Talking about Bellator and talking about that transition, what's that transition been like for you? Obviously, you're a good talker. We could BS forever, and you love the sport so much. But just talk about making that move.
I'm so lucky that I had the people in place that you're talking about. I had Mike Goldberg, and I've known Mike, since '97.
Sure.
Back when he first started or so with the UFC, and he really helped me out and just say, just relax here as far as you don't have to talk a whole lot here. You know what? I'm gonna touch you on the shoulder. So I didn't know when to pop in, when to pop out. So he really helped me with that. And then Morrow gave me some really good tips about, hey, I'm going to say this, and this, if I bring up a fight, I want you to roll into it off of that, because he's got a really good memory. When it comes to fights, I've got a good memory. So that worked out really well with him. But it's the other people behind the scenes that no one sees that really helped me out.
Those guys are so different too. Morrow and Mike are, I think, I'm a commentator myself, and when I look at those two, I see them as being very contrasting, just because Morrow's always been such a technical guy. I mean, this guy, even when it comes to mixed martial arts, when it comes to boxing, when it comes to professional wrestling, I don't know that anybody can touch his technical knowledge of just knowing every move and every procedure. It's pretty amazing. The guy could probably run color if he wanted to be honest with you.
Well, he has.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Remember back in Strikeforce, they had Gus Johnson would come in.
Yes. Good call. Gus Johnson, who is very different as well. That's a whole other conversation. That being said, and then Mike is he's that guy that can carry a broadcast. I've never thought of him being, the absolute technical whiz, but you don't have to be if you're a play-by-play, if you know what you're doing, because there's a lot to carry when it comes to sponsor reads, when it comes to all these different things that a play-by-play has going through their head. So those guys are so different. Just talk about the difference working with those guys.
Well, it is exactly what you're saying. Mike is like, if you're taking a look at a pitcher, Mike is like the Kurt Schilling. He's so steady, so consistent.
And definitely on PEDs.
No PEDs. It might be, but no, he's so consistent, and he keeps throwing these same pitches, and he's so good with them and does it and just puts it where it needs to be every time. Morrow is the guy Mike will create room for you to speak. Morrow he doesn't create room for you to speak until he all of a sudden realizes, I got to ask a question here, and he'll pop in with a question. But Morrow's the guy who he just overwhelms. He's the Randy Johnson. He's throwing heat the whole time, and it's coming fast, and you better look out because he's almost touching the plate as he releases it. But they're both fun to work with, and they both make it fun for me.
Well, you guys have an awesome broadcast team over there, and just the show in general. I've always had this weird relationship with Bellator, just as a journalist and then just as a fan, and it just seems like with Bellator that, I guess it all depends on what you grade success by, because they've always had a very, very consistent product. It's always been good. There's always been great fights that have come out of Bellator, but it seems like UFC is just the Jell-O of that world. They are the name brand. They are the Coca-Cola. And Bellator is always, I don't know if they're trying to get there or if they're happy where they're at. They've always had a good product. They've always brought in good names. What do you think it is about the product, and do you feel like it's on its way to being eye to eye with UFC one day?
Well, I don't, when
or
you
do
talk
you
about,
think there's a goal there to do something?
I think
like that?
the goal, Scott Coker's goal, is different than Dana's goal. Scott Coker approaches fights with the mentality of, that's a fun fight. That's the fight I'd like to see. That would be fun. He doesn't really care about ranking so much, or if he looks at a fight and this is the number one guy or the number one girl and number two, and he looks and he goes, it's going to be a boring fight. He doesn't want to put it on, where Dana is going to want to put that on because that's number one against number two, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So they look at things just differently. They promote differently. They interact differently. Yeah. So I think, you do have a good point there. Look at it. The UFC is the Coca-Cola. Bellator is the Pepsi.
Sure.
But Pepsi tastes great. Okay, and
I'm a Pepsi guy.
The thing about the thing that's really funny is there's a lot of fighters that are traveling back and forth between Bellator to the UFC to Bellator. But anytime someone comes from the UFC to Bellator, they're a has-been. They're past their prime. They're no good. When it's just not true. They're in the prime of their career. And I could sit here and start naming them off.
Yeah.
But there's that perception out there that if you're not fighting for the UFC, you're just no longer good.
And that's such a perfect segue to what I was about to ask you. Who are the fighters on the roster with Bellator? And it can even be former UFC guys that you think could move into the UFC tomorrow and could run up there and be a champion. Who are the guys that come to your head immediately that you think could be a champion in the UFC, no problem?
Wow. First off, Gegard Mousasi could go back to the UFC, and I would love to see Gegard versus Adesanya at 185. Come on, that would be just an incredible fight. So, that's one guy. Go down one weight class into welterweight. Douglas Lima could fight with anybody. In fact, I'm not saying he's going to beat Usman, but I'm not saying he's going to lose to him either, because both guys could win that fight. Douglas Lima now is so good. His leg kicks are as strong as any fighter you've ever seen. He's got great defensive wrestling. He is a monster out there. So he could move in there, and there's nobody in the UFC's welterweight division that you could look at and say, oh, Lima can't beat him. No, he can beat every one of them. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have guys that could beat him. That's fighting. And that's why you fight the fights. But he's just remarkable at this moment. Then you step down again and go to the 155-pound weight class. And that's where I would say there's a couple of guys that we have in there that they're really moving up. Brent Primus, super, super good ground game, very strong in the his ground and pound attack. Mike Chandler is a guy, he might be moving over to the UFC, but Mike is good. Mike's good everywhere.
Yeah, been good for a long time.
Been caught. If you go down, past, into the featherweight, Patricio Pitbull, he could fight with anybody.
Sure.
Okay. Let's just be honest. He is a remarkable fighter that used to fight very, I always talk about, you don't fight angry. You fight smart. And he was a guy who was so volatile that he would make mistakes because he would get angry. And he's a guy that learned, then he started just being angry on the outside, and then step in the cage and he calms down and he fights very smart. He makes people fight the fight he wants. And you could look at the matchups that could happen with him in the UFC. And then there's guys like AJ McKee at 145. He could fight with anybody there. So look at, when you're talking about the top 5 guys in Bellator and the top 5, they can intertwine very well.
Yeah.
Most weight classes.
I agree with that. I mean, there's guys that we've seen in ACB and some of these overseas organizations that, given the right opportunity, they're going to do incredible work in the UFC or in Bellator.
Well, you take a look at, Peter Yan is a guy that, I refereed at ACB. You were there. You actually introduced himself, and he was the champion there. And I said, man, wherever that guy goes, he's going to give people a lot of problems. He is just good. And UFC picks him up, and look at what happens. He hasn't lost. Okay. He's
on his way,
taking on guys that are legends, like Uriah and stuff. And now he's going to be getting a shot at, Aldo for the title, since Cejudo's going to vacate it. And you look and you go, yep, call that one. And there's those guys out there, and those guys are still out there. There's a couple that we did in ACB that I go, that guy could fight with anybody, anywhere.
Yeah, no, awesome stuff. And we don't have much time left here, and I got to get a story out of you. It's funny. I talked to Pat Miletich, and he gave me some just awesome stories talking about the old school, like, extreme challenge Monty Cox stuff that was just mind-blowing, fun stuff. Give me a good story from early UFC, from the early days, that just kind of, you think back and it just kind of makes you laugh, that it's just how far this sport has come.
Oh my God. If you're going to go back into the one thing that cracks me up about people now is if they do go back and watch some of that stuff, you know, they always correlate the rules of today with the rules back then. And I'll get like tweets from, you know, man, you let that guy get headbutted. You sucked, right? And you look and go, yeah, I sucked. But, you know, it was, the thing about back then, and that I really see is the difference of, you know, the old guys compared to what we have today with the young studs of today is there was just a mentality difference. They weren't making a lot of money back then.
Of course.
You know, it wasn't something that most of them could, you know, say, I'm going to quit my job because I can actually, you know, put food on the table with this. This was an added thing where they got to have vacation money and things like that. But you would get these guys together, and we always had parties after the shows. And these parties would end up turning into mini brawls every time. And it was always, you know, I always like, I don't want to go in there. Oh, you got to come. And I was like, no, because then I have to referee the parties afterwards. And I was always in position picking guys up and walking with the world champion of the UFC at the time. And he's saying, let me go, John. Right? You know, and I'm thinking, if I let you go, you're going to turn around and kill me. So I'm just going to keep on walking here. You know, and it was just a different mentality of the time. You know, Pat Miletich being part of it. I remember Pat, you know, chasing Tank Abbott down the streets and stuff. And we had good times, but people were sometimes a little out of control, but it was a lot of fun.
And then obviously all over the world, I'm sure you've been in some wild countries. I mean, I've been, you know, your Kazakhstans, and I mean, I was in Romania's and Bulgaria's and all the EAs, and give me a story that just got, what's that?
All the Jans.
Oh yes.
Azerbaijan, Dagestan.
Give me a good one, man. Some of those hotels, I mean, gosh, it's just some of those places that you get put up in and some of the places that you're at. And a lot of the time you have your wife with you on top of that. You have Elaine there with you. So just give me a good story where you're like, oh my gosh, where am I at? What am I doing here?
Well, did you work in Chechnya?
No.
Rosny? Never went. Okay.
No, I got out of that one.
Man, you know, I went there when I went for a show, and they put, you know, they're saying all this stuff. Oh, they're going to treat you so good. Get picked up in a bicycle van, right? They take us, go and, you know, can't get my hotel room. Walk into the elevator that I swear to you is about 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet, right? You got to hold your bag above your head, you know, to get it, the whole thing in there. And then just the whole trip was like, where am I? But then we finally get to the night of the fight, something great. And they actually have this whole stadium that they made for MMA. And I'm walking in, and they've got these guys, and they're sitting there with their berets on, and they've got AK-47s, but they've got grenades attached to a bandolier, 3 and 4 grenades. And I'm walking by and going, and what the hell are they going to do with that? You know? I was like, I am in the wrong place doing the wrong thing right now. But, you know, those are those situations you just look at. You can look back at them now and go, that's kind of funny.
Oh,
man.
man.
Different place.
Well, it's a wild sport. It's been an awesome journey, and it just keeps getting better as we go. We'll have to do a part 2 to this, because I'll tell you, there's more things I want to ask you. I just interviewed Bob Sapp. I would love to talk about Bob Sapp with you. That dude is something else. That being said, we're going to wrap it up right now. And John, thank you so much for taking some time, and let everybody know about the podcast, man, what you're doing right now. Obviously, that's how you're staying busy.
Yeah, the podcast I have is with Josh Thompson, you know, and it's called Weighing In with Josh the Punk Thompson and Big John McCarthy. It's you can get it on YouTube, Google Play, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, all those different types of outlets, and just hit the subscribe for us. You know, we're doing pretty good with it. People seem to be liking it. I get a lot of best MMA podcasts, you know, out there going. So people like what we're doing. Some people don't. That's life. That's the way it is. Okay.
I was about to say, and then everybody that's watching this, send all your criticism for all of John's early stoppages and bad stoppages his way on Twitter. He'd love to see
That's it.
John, thank you so much, man. And that is it for us on this episode. Make sure you check out all of our social media. Big thanks to Herb Dean and Big John McCarthy. I'm Cyrus Fees. We'll see you next time on In This Corner.